Welcome to this very special episode. It is our very first Ask Us Anything. First of all, I'm glad you guys asked us aquarium related questions because we did say ask us anything. So I'm just really happy I don't have to answer really awkward questions on camera and possibly embarrass myself. But before we begin, leave a comment below and ask us more questions because we'll be giving away UNS swag bags to 3 lucky winners. All you have to do is leave a comment. It would help if you're a subscriber too, so subscribe to our channel.
Definitely.
I have Hip with me today.
Hi.
So let's just start off.
Yeah, all right. All right, so let's begin. Our first question is actually not a question. This comes from Jobs Perez, and they ask, well, they said, hi. So
hi.
Hello.
Ask us the question though.
And we have a question from...
Sorry if we butchered the names. Some of these names are really hard to pronounce, but we'll try our best, okay?
And this one is from Pratik Nalwad, KA26. The question is, why fish die in purchasing in shop 2 and 3 days die?
Be sure to make sure you're acclimating your livestock correctly. The method I use, which works pretty much almost every single time, aside from very sensitive fish and shrimp, is I will float the bag of fish in my aquarium, have the 2 temperatures meet in equilibrium, give it like about 20 to 30 minutes, and that usually does it. Another tip that I like to do is I turn off the aquarium lights so that it doesn't spook the fish in their new environment, and then I'll release the fish. I won't use the fish store water. I'll just net the fish out, put them in the aquarium, and slowly turn the lights back on, and you should be able to have very happy livestock in the next few days. Okay, so the next question, Aqua Anubius, EI versus lean dosing. Which do you prefer?
So I prefer lean dosing over those 2 options because when you have too many excess nutrients in the water, that could really lead into algae issues if you don't really have a lot of experience. And so typically I prefer to do lean dosing because everything is just lower maintenance. If I'm not in a rush to grow quickly, then I feel like it's a more stable environment to go on the lean side. All right, so this one's for you, John. This comes from Bonzi Colt, and the question is, how can you use CO2 but not fluctuate pH so much?
I start my CO2 injection 2 to 3 hours before the lights are on. There will be some pH fluctuation, but it's gonna be very gradual. It's not gonna be super sudden. That's what a solenoid is for on your CO2 regulators. So make sure you get a solenoid or get a regulator with a solenoid. That way, in most cases, your livestock won't have any problems with it. I've never heard of any problems with livestock if you have a good regulator. I recommend the UNS regulators, by the way.
They're very good.
Shameless plug.
And this question is from Fabian.frz. More UNS equipment in Europe soon?
I would say definitely yes. We just started sending tanks to Europe this January, so give us a little bit more time and you'll start seeing more UNS products pop up here and there. Also, most of our electronic products are US plugs, basically, and we still need time in production to convert them. So just be a little patient. We already know that there's a huge demand in Europe. We're happy to be there. Me and Hip just went there, so yeah. We understand the need for Ultem Nature systems in Europe, and we're gonna get there. Trust me, we will. Okay, Nicholas Smith 97 asks, is there a tank size you would like to see more creatively explored by aquascapers using your tanks?
Yes, and actually that kind of points back to the new tall tanks that we just released. I think that it's a really exciting new way to explore aquascaping because we have been focused so much on depth front to back in recent years, and it'd be really cool what we can do taller. And so these new tall tanks with a really nice clear glass canvas, I think it's going to be a really cool new frontier for people to explore and get really creative of what you can do with that extra height. And so there's definitely a lot of opportunities here to do that. So pick up one of the new tall tanks, and I'd love to see what you guys do with it. Tag us on Instagram. This next one is from Namer_NJR10. This is definitely a John question. How to grow Monte Carlo in a dry start method?
Great question. I love Monte Carlo, and everybody should know that. But
for every one of his tanks.
Yes, but I would say stick around till the next few episodes, and we actually have a dry start video coming out very soon.
Oh.
So subscribe if you want to learn how to do dry start method. We actually documented 9 weeks of dry start footage. So that's going to be a really good one. Stay tuned. Impractical Squid asks, how do you get rid of pest snails? See new ones on the wall every day, ...
My favorite option are pea puffers. I really love pea puffers, and pretty much every one of my planted tanks are okay for them to be in. And so not only is it a really cool fish to have, but they do a great job on pest snails. I have actually had 1 or 2 occasions where I would drop one single pea puffer into the tank, and my snail problem was gone within about 3 or 4 days. All right, and this one is from simply_aquascaping. What inspired the creation of UNS?
So I wasn't here for the actual creation of UNS, but the story goes, there were these 3 hobbyists once upon a time who were very much into shrimp keeping, planted aquariums, and fish keeping, who couldn't find an affordable solution to a nice rimless tank. So one day they decided to create their own rimless aquarium. And that's when UNS started. The end. True story. Alright, I have a detour question. I have a personal question to ask Hip right now. Did you decide to match me, or did I decide to match you today? Because it's kind of awkward.
Wait, you matched me because I told you what I was wearing today.
I mean,
but you didn't tell me what he didn't tell me what he was wearing. So actually, he's copying me this time.
I don't read any texts that are sent to me after 11 p.m. at night. So, I don't know. You guys decide. Leave a comment.
Who wears it better? That's the question. You guys tell me who you like better in this polo.
Zombier asks, how do you guys, as an aquarium manufacturer, recommend to clean the aquarium silicone corners in a running tank?
This is a good question. Well, luckily, if you have a UNS tank, you won't need to because our silicone doesn't really stick out past the glass. But you do have to be careful when you're cleaning your glass, like with a razor. Try not to go all the way to the edge, or else you might get your razor into your silicone. But typically, what I like to do on these corners of the tank is just to take a soft toothbrush and go up and down the sides of the tank. Toothbrush really does a great job of just usually getting everything out of that corner. Okay, next one's for you. This is from Kenneth's Tropical Fish. Can I run CO2 24/7 in a freshly planted tank for a month before I add livestock?
You can. CO2 is used by plants during photosynthesis, which means that when the lights are on, basically. So, I mean, in the most realistic and practical sense, if you have your lights on for 24/7, you could run your CO2 on for 24/7 also. But if you want to save a little bit of electricity bill payments monthly, then I would say run it normal. But we have done that 24/7 just to get our tanks to grow way faster than they normally do in, say, like your typical 8-hour time span throughout the day. So yes, and on a practicality side, no. So
Yeah, assuming your lights are actually on when the CO2
Yes.
is on 24/7.
Yes.
If your
Because
lights are off, then it's
if you're running CO2, just CO2, it doesn't matter because if your lights are off, then there's no point in running the CO2 24/7. So if you're asking that question, then run your lights 24/7. Chicano Aquatics asks a lot of questions actually, but
thank you for that, by the way.
one of his questions, or her questions, I'm not sure, correct me in the comments. Chicano Aquatics asks, if you had to say, where do you see this hobby going in the next 10 years?
Well, where I see the hobby going, and hope where the hobby going, where the hobby is going, is first thing is just expansion. More people getting into the hobby, more people getting interested in aquariums, planted tanks, aquascaping. I think that lately I've seen more and more people pick it up as a hobby for their enjoyment, and that makes me really happy to see so many people joining in and interacting with the community. The other thing I'm hoping to see the hobby go in 10 years, especially here in America, is just access to quality materials such as hardscape, tanks, equipment. I'm hoping to see more access for that to people in an affordable way, and a whole part of our fundamental as a company is to achieve that goal. So this is where I see it going, and we're doing our part, working really hard to make sure that it happens. So what we want to do is get more people into it, through these videos and things like that, but also provide you guys with better hardscape, better tanks and things like that.
Yeah, to add on to that, I would say when I first started in 2004, which was more than 10 years ago, the community was very, very small. Everybody knew who everybody was as an aquascaper. So I would agree with Hip by saying the community is just increasingly, exponentially growing bigger and way faster nowadays thanks to social media. So I would expect to see a ton more aquascapers, a ton more fish keepers in the hobby in the next 10 years. If it's not just only like product innovation and accessibility. Yeah, if you know people who are interested, be sure to introduce them to the hobby. This is one of the greatest hobbies on the planet. I mean, it's better than watching TV, right?
Okay, and this next question is also from Chicano Aquatics. What would you guys consider the biggest misconception in the hobby?
The biggest misconception in the hobby is that it's expensive. If you actually think about it, it's not really that expensive to get into this hobby. There's multiple entry points in terms of budget. When I first started, I was in junior high, high school. I was running on like a part-time job budget and weekly allowance. So if I was able to get into the hobby back then, I can only imagine how affordable it is to get into this hobby now. You have so many options, so many different variations of plants that you can get at different budgets, hardscape that you can get at different budgets. So I don't see that being a very difficult entry point into this hobby. I don't know if you have anything to add.
Yeah, and I actually have some great advice for that. Make friends. One of my favorite parts of the hobby is the community, and nowadays we have so many avenues to interact with people, right? So like on social media, Facebook, things like that. Join groups, make friends.
Local
Your
fish
friends can
groups.
help you out.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is, I think it's really important that you start off with good equipment and if you did have to spend money, definitely start off with, quality things so that you don't end up having to rebuy equipment over and over again. And this is, again, what we're trying to do is provide you guys with really great materials so that you don't have to, buy another one over and over again. So start off with quality equipment.
Do your due diligence in terms of research into this hobby. Like Hip said, when I first started, I just wanted to buy everything that was shiny and new, and I ended up spending way more than I should have when I could have just toned it down and started with a very humble setup. So I dumped a lot of my personal money into this hobby when I first started, and I almost went broke doing it. So I get why there's that misconception, but if you do your due diligence and you make friends in this hobby, people are more than willing to give you the right information, or watch our videos. You can't go wrong with them. Also, join local fish groups. There's always free giveaways and whatnot. In fact, we're doing a free giveaway now.
Comment.
Leave a comment.
Yeah.
Kevin Hong asked 2 questions, but I'm going to combine them both. They are, what's a good water change / maintenance cycle? And what would the schedule look like when you're starting your tank versus when it's stable?
So yeah, Kevin's actually my cousin. Hi, Kevin. That's a great question. So as far as a water change / maintenance schedule, my recommendation is as often as you can do it.
Yes.
Once a week or once every 2 weeks is pretty reasonable, especially if you can find a way to make it enjoyable for yourself. So as often as you can afford to. I mean, if I could do daily water changes, I would do daily water changes. But I think once a week to maybe once every 2 weeks is a pretty reasonable approach to it. What I would do differently when starting a new tank, like establishing a new tank, honestly, I wouldn't unless you're using some sort of like super nutrient-rich aqua soil that leaches a lot of ammonia. Our soil, the UNS Contra soil, does not leach a ton of ammonia at the start. So if you're using our soil, you won't need to do those daily water changes at first, but I know some other soils may require that. So you may need to, depending on what substrate you use for a new tank. But if you're using ours, then you don't need to really do anything differently when you're starting a new tank versus an older tank. In fact, I would even try to do less water changes to keep that environment stable for your bacteria to establish itself when you start trying to cycle a tank. But yeah, as often as you can do it, honestly.
I would say water changes are probably one of the most important things that you can do for the overall benefit of your planted aquarium. You never know what's really lying dormant in your aquarium.
That's
like
true.
Harmful organic waste. You can't really see it visibly until things start to go awry, such as algae appears or your livestock look like they're hurting a little. But water changes can counteract that and prevent that. So water changes. Don't get lazy.
Okay, and this next one comes from All About Aquascaping. After doing hardscape, what is the best method to go for? Dark start or dry start is better. Just after planting or flooding is the best way to stabilize the tank and plants. And this is coming from a place of where melting of plants is a big issue during their initial stage.
Okay, so let's break this down and kind of describe what every method is first. So this is going to take me a while, so bear with me. Let's go with the ones that we already know. So flooding the tank right after planting is the most standard and most typical way to start a planted tank. Basically, after you're done planting all the plants in the substrate, like you've seen in all our videos, we fill the tank right away. And then the next method is the dry start method. It's kind of tried and true. You're basically growing aquatic plants in a terrarium-like humid environment and letting it grow their emergent leaves first, and then flooding the tank. That way the root system is much more established, the plant is a little bit stronger, but it still has to transition itself into fully aquatic during the next few weeks after you flood the tank. And the dark start method is relatively new to this hobby. At first I really thought it was gimmicky, but after thinking about the method kind of deeper and watching other people do it, I kind of get why people do it. So in the dark start method, what people do is they don't plant the tank at all. What they do is they just have the hardscape laid out, the substrate in, and all the details are in there except for the plants. So no lights are on, it's just the filter running during this dark start. And as the tank is cycling itself and all the ammonia from the soil is leached out due to water changes, then you start planting the tank. You'll drain the whole tank down and plant it like you normally do, and then fill it back up. That way there's no plant melt. Now let's dig deeper into that and discover why there's potentially plant melt in the beginning of any flooding of a tank, right? So plant melt comes from either excess ammonia. A lot of substrates in this hobby come with ammonia, very, very little ammonia, just to help cycle your tank. That's the reason why it's in there. It's not actually in there for any other purpose. It's to jumpstart your aquarium. So the release of ammonia into the water column can actually melt plants. This is very typical with HC Cuba, I would say dwarf baby tears for the people who know the common plant name. Crypts melt very easy. Also, plants will melt if they are sensitive, just like crypts. Another way they melt is because of the water chemistry is totally different than what they were in before, such as your fish store's plant holding tank or whatnot is different than the water you're using in your own aquarium at home. But based on my experience, the best way to really start a tank is just flooding it right from the start.
Yes.
And then doing your water changes. A lot of people don't want to do the water changes, but that's part of this hobby. You should always do water changes. We start plenty of tanks here. We've started a ton on video here, and we've given you guys progress updates throughout this year on multiple different tanks. There has been minimal to zero melt in any of our tanks. And this is because we've just been very diligent on our maintenance and water changes. And by doing water changes, even if there's ammonia in your water, you're going to be taking it out.
Yeah, you're flushing it out.
Right? So in a sense, a lot of people are trying to shortcut their way out of maintenance, I guess. No offense, but all these methods do work. It's just that there are pros and cons to different methods though. But I want to give a shout out to the Europeans who actually popularized the dark start method. It was very interesting, and I actually wanted to try it, and I did, and it did work. It's just that I was looking at a very dark tank with no plants, just hardscape. So if you don't mind that, that's fine. And if you have the patience for a dry start method, that usually takes 2 to 3 months to even get the plants to grow out. But flooding, you get to see kind of almost how the overall tank will look instantly. So it's a matter of your patience level and kind of how you want to time everything. Hopefully this answers your question. That was a very, very long answer to a very, very long question. Big Mike WYCZ asks, can too much water movement be bad for plants?
That's a really great question. Now it really depends on how you would define too much water movement.
Let's just say river flowing.
Like a lot of flow is actually really good for an aquarium because you want to keep that water movement kicking up detritus and having the nutrients in the water column moving around so that the plants can actually utilize them. But when flow gets to a point where it's blowing your plants to the side, well, I guess it depends on how rigid your plants are too, but I think that too much flow to the point where it can affect your plant's growth pattern would be too much, but generally I haven't seen any tanks that have too much flow. I think that, you know, the filters are doing a pretty good job of keeping it at a certain level. So I would say unless you're putting some really giant power heads, I wouldn't consider flow to be an issue. In fact, more flow is typically what I'm looking for, so that there's good water movement and circulation in your tank. You really don't want any dead spots because that's where your detritus and organic matter is going to collect. And when that happens, that's where you get algae issues. So no, I don't think too much flow, but to a certain point, when it starts to affect the pattern of your plant growth, like they're growing to the side or something, that's when I would say it's too much, but it would be pretty difficult to get to that point.
I think the standard amount is 10 times the flow of your aquarium, right? Or
Yeah,
something around there
yeah. Per hour.
Yeah, and also remember, a lot of these plants come from natural flowing rivers, such as Bucephalandra. I know that for sure. They come from very fast flowing rivers, at least a lot of the different types do. So they are really actually used to high flow. And that type of flow you wouldn't even use in an aquarium because it's just too much.
Yeah.
Okay, so last question from user John Zhang.
I knew this was coming.
He asked, what's the richest fish?
A goldfish?
He got it. He finally got it.
Yes, I got one.
He finally got it. I didn't get him. Okay, outro it is. We're going outro. We're going outro. That failed.
All right, so those were the questions for this episode. Thank you so much for all of your inputs and responses, guys. I hope you learned a lot from this episode, and we encourage you to send more every time we post for your questions. Really great responses this time. Unfortunately, we couldn't get through all of them, but we'll have more of these coming out. And one last reminder, just remember that we are doing a giveaway for this video as well, so make sure you leave a comment. If you have some questions that didn't get covered, then you want to make sure that you leave a comment on this one so that we see it.
3 lucky winners.
3 lucky winners, that's right.
You'll get UNS swag bags, and all you need to do is comment down below, ask a question, or leave a comment, or even answer one of these questions if you want to expand on any of the,
that's a great idea.
Answers that we said. Hit the subscribe button, like this video, leave a comment, hit that notification bell.
Thank you so much, guys. We'll see you next time.
Bye.